That if my definition is understood, that racism, white supremacy is the fear on the part of people who classify themselves as white about white genetic annihilation and the concern for white genetic survival. This would therefore mean logically and specifically that the focus has to be on black males because black people have the greatest genetic potential to produce the black pigment melanin, which gives all skin color. And since we have the highest level of genetically determined ability to produce this pigment that can cause white genetic annihilation, and it's only males who can impose sexual intercourse. And so the focus consciously, subconsciously has to zero in on the males. This is why I say that understanding, I'm not talking about institutional racism, I'm talking about a total system construct that develops out of certain patterns of thinking on the part of people who classify themselves as white relative to specific realities that exist on this planet. And so then once that is understood, that the fear of genetic annihilation, that takes to the focus on the male, the black male person, as being the number one perceived threat, the number one enemy, and everything flows from that.
I've always thought black masculinity has been under attack. That's just me personally. But knowing, just understanding how warfare, battle, and the tactics people use to impose themselves on other people. If you have to dismantle or disable the males and get the males out of the way to have access to the women and children. So the men, black men, are going to be a target because they're the protectors and they're the as you can say, the person who's the instigator in sex, or the person who's initiating sex, rather. So I do know you have to get the man out the way to get to the women and children. Once, like you said earlier, once you get to the women and children, you can impose whatever type of ideas and things. Yes, you're gonna get fight. You're gonna get some resistance, but you're gonna get a little less resistance, especially if they've seen their men be decimated. So think about what we see on a regular basis from a lot of black men. There's some good black men, some real black men out there. Shout out to all of them. But you know, a lot of the images and things that we've been fed over the years throughout our life about black men has been negative. The docile, black man lazy, black men stupid, black men can't do this, black men can't do that, black men in second class, black man is negative. And then, but coupling that with what she's saying about the genetic need to survive, but also understanding that this group of people that we enslaved and these people who are behind enemy lines have the greatest potential to breed us out.
So on one hand, I get it in terms of, because I was just reading a study earlier this week talking about how violence towards members of an outgroup actually elicits a response in the reward circuitry of the brain. So, you know, to simplify that for people, your brain responds favorably to you attacking somebody that's not a part of your group. And so that alone explains a lot, just that by itself. But on the other end, I agree with what you said in terms of you have to get the men out of the way because of the way confrontations and wars and conflicts between groups are typically fought. It's typically a physical activity, a physical interaction where men are clashing against each other. And women, while they can participate in that activity and they have been successful, generally speaking, an army of men and an army of women, the army of men is going to win, generally speaking, barring technological advances and stuff like that. So that's where I say I agree with what you're saying from the protector standpoint. And that's also where I kind of waver a bit from her stance on it's purely about the males being able to force sex on the women, so we have to remove them from the equation because black men could essentially white women if they wanted to. That's not what she said, but
Right.
it's kind of paraphrasing of her saying men can impose sex.
Right.
And we know in today's day and age women can impose sex as well. But that's I think that's modern.
Well, yeah, I mean, but in a larger sense, the imposition of sex is mainly going to come from the male. But women can impose sex. But white women can impose sex on us in this system and where we at now.
Right. That's what I'm getting at. That's what I'm getting at. And also from the standpoint of it would also take off the table, not take off the table, but make the conversation more difficult to have on other means and other uses for sexual warfare involving white women engaging with black men, such as the case which would be if a white woman finds herself in a marriage or a sexual relationship with a black man that has a lot of resources, knowing that black man is probably going to die before her. Those resources are going to get transferred to her and her community through that relationship. So I think that's again where you run into this area where she's talking purely about the biological imperative, but there's also this cultural piece that we need to grapple with on the other end that creates different possibilities than those that are purely presented from the biological standpoint. Does that make sense?
But yeah, it does. But I think that's beauty. That's the beauty in what we're doing in these videos that we're going to make. This is going to be the first of a series of a whole bunch of, but us breaking down these videos, because one of the main things like we talked about is looking at this information, analyzing this information, and thinking, how is this relevant to us today? Like in 2022, where we are right now, in June of 2022, how can we use Dr. Welsing's message to help us today? And not just because we got to get past the point where we're just listening to these people and admiring. Yes, Dr. Welsing, Dr. Amos Wilson, all on live. We know, but how can we use the information to make our individual and collective lives better? And if we're not thinking in that pathway, then we wasting their time.
Right. So somebody's got to pick up the torch and run with it. Somebody's got to take it a step further. And sometimes going further means taking a few steps back, which is something we need to do with all of our scholars because we have more information available than they had at the time. And we also have the ability of both foresight from their original position and hindsight from our original position. And it's kind of a waste if we don't use that. There is a lot of brilliant things that Dr. Cress Welsing said, put forth, and made. But if you're just going to take her philosophy from 30 years ago and cut and paste it to today, you're not doing anybody any good.
We don't need no amen corners. That's not what we need.